It's Nancy with Who Will Let the Dogs Out. So we saw some news this week that I've been sitting with, trying to figure out the right way to talk about it, because it's not a simple story and I don't want to tell it like it is one. Charlotte-Mecklenburg Animal Care and Control just announced that they're closing their doors to owner surrenders. They used to have appointments, but as of, I think, July 1st, maybe, really soon, they will not be doing even that. They're just not taking owner surrenders at all. If you followed our work for a while, you probably have noticed in the comments that Charlotte-Mecklenburg is one of the shelters we point to all the time in the comments as examples of a shelter that is doing it right. We visited them on a recent trip, and we've held them up as one of the shelters doing things right and making it all work. So, I want to talk about why this is happening and why it's not a gotcha like some people will try to use it as, trying to make it into something that it's not. What it actually means for their community going forward is also important. So here's the thing people get wrong about stories like this. The instinct is to treat a policy change like this as evidence that the shelter failed or the leadership gave up or the good guys turned out to not be so good after all. So that's not at all what's happening. And I think it's worth saying plainly, this is a large shelter serving a huge, fast-growing population. And they hit a resource ceiling, and that's it. That's the story underneath the story. This isn't a leadership failure, it's an infrastructure failure. Infrastructure failures are upstream of any one shelter director or any one staff. What actually makes Charlotte-Mecklenburg different, what's made them one of the shelters we trust most, is sitting right in front of you right now. They didn't bury this. They didn't quietly change policy and hope nobody noticed. They made it public. They built a relationship with their community over years by being transparent. Even if the news is bad, and this is the same transparency, just under harder circumstances. That's rare. Most shelters in crisis go quiet, and this one didn't. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this is fine and it's going to be a neutral thing, because it's not. We know from shelter after shelter what happens when owner surrender access closes. People who would have surrendered responsibly through the front door, with their dog's history, with some warning, don't just stop having dogs that they can't keep. Some of them will dump. Some of them release them into neighborhoods, into parks, into rural roads, and just drive away. That's not a hypothetical. It happens all the time. We've documented it at shelter after shelter that chose to make this same call. So the honest version of this story is closing to owner surrenders doesn't make the problem disappear. It just moves the problem from the shelter's intake desk to the street. And the street doesn't have kennels or vet care or stray hold. It just has whatever happens next. I want to raise something here because I think it's the most important part of this story, and it's the part that's probably going to get the least attention. Closing to owner surrenders isn't unique to Charlotte-Mecklenburg. It's a move that shows up in a lot of no-kill consulting frameworks and conference guidance as a way to manage live release rates. The logic is straightforward. If a dog never enters your building, that dog can never be one of your euthanasia numbers. The stats improve. The math on the wall looks better. And here's what I think gets lost in that math. Charlotte-Mecklenburg did everything right. They built strong foster programs. They have daycations. They have engaged and supportive community. They have a great volunteer base. They run real enrichment programs. They have 3 vets on staff, and they spay and neuter 4 days a week. They have long, open public hours every single day, and so many great programs, it would take too much time to talk about, but I'll post the link about what we wrote when we visited. They've led with transparency instead of hiding from hard news. By almost any measure, this is the shelter that was supposed to prove the model works. And they're still over capacity. I think that tells us something about the limits of the model itself, not about the shelter or its leadership. So when a shelter doing everything right, still has to close the door, and then the recommended next move is to stop letting dogs through that door at all, I think it's worth asking a question that doesn't get asked enough. What actually happens to the dog who gets turned away? Because that dog doesn't disappear. It doesn't go somewhere safe by default. In a lot of cases, it goes back into a situation that was already failing it, or it ends up abandoned, or it ends up exactly on the side of the road we just talked about. The dog isn't saved, it's just no longer counted. And a slow death from exposure, starvation, disease, or being hit by a car is not a better outcome than a humane decision made inside a shelter. It's just one that doesn't show up on anybody's spreadsheet. That's the harder truth underneath a lot of no-kill policy. The goal is supposed to be fewer dogs suffering, not just fewer dogs being counted. So here's what I'd ask the Charlotte-Mecklenburg community to pay attention to over the next few months. Not because there's some action we're asking you to take, but because this is exactly the kind of moment where the data tells the real story. Watch your stray population. Is it visibly increasing in your neighborhood? More loose dogs, more dogs you don't recognize. Watch what's happening with animal control call volume on strays. That number's going to move, and it's going to move because of this decision and not in spite of it. And this is one that's hard. Watch the dead on arrival calls. Dogs hit on the road. That number tells you something nothing else does, because that's the most concrete possible evidence of dogs that had nowhere else to go. None of this is about blaming the shelter for what's happening next. It's about understanding that when you remove a release valve from a system that's already under pressure, the pressure doesn't go away. It just shows up somewhere else. And the community is in the best position to actually see where. And they should document everything. I'll keep saying this as many times as I have to. The dogs showing up at shelters and the dogs showing up dead on the side of the road are downstream of the exact same failure. Not enough spay and neuter access, not enough public investment, not enough upstream infrastructure to keep this from landing on any one shelter's doorstep in the first place. Charlotte-Mecklenburg didn't create this problem. They've been doing the work to manage it about as well as it can be managed. Now they've hit a wall that a lot of communities are going to hit if we don't change what's happening upstream. So watch what's happening here, not because it's going to be easy to watch, it probably won't be, but because what happens in Charlotte-Mecklenburg over the next few months is going to be a preview for a lot of other cities that haven't gotten there yet. Thanks for watching. I'll keep you posted as we hear more.